They shot down our drone. What should our answer be?
Well, we should hold them accountable and say that if you ever get near another U.S. set flying in international waters, your airplane would be shot down. What would Ronald Reagan do right now? He would start shooting Russian planes down if they were threatening our assets.
Shooting down Russian planes is clearly a severe escalation of war with a nuclear power. Let's just get that part out of the way. But Senator Lindsey Graham loves escalations of war as he comfortably sits in wherever he is in the United States and does the bidding of the defense contractors who fund his campaign. But with that said, it is worth kind of going back to see what sparked that conversation, what sparked that demand by Senator Graham. What are they talking about? Well, there was unfortunately a collision. So it was a Russian plane and a US drone. Okay, now after that incident happened, you have both sides giving you completely different narratives. You have the Russian side giving you one narrative, the US giving you another narrative. But video has now been released, and it does appear that the United States and its argument in this particular case was correct. The video does show that a Russian plane crashed into a United States drone. Let's watch.
Minutes ago, we just got dramatic new video from the Pentagon released by the military where you can see a Russian fighter jet as it was approaching the back of the American drone that has now been downed for about 4,000 to 5,000 feet in the Black Sea. In this video that has just been released moments ago, you can see where this Russian fighter jet is going up to this American drone. It is dumping fuel on it. That is what you're seeing in the video as it's approaching here. Then the jet goes away, it comes back, it dumps more fuel, and then it hits the American drone. It clipped the drone, one of the Russian fighter jets did. That is when you see the color bars there. Ultimately, of course, this is what led up to the downing of this drone we have been following all week since this happened. This interaction that happened on Tuesday, we were told lasted for over half an hour. Now, of course, that US drone was forced to be downed in the Black Sea.
Now we're talking about a US drone. We're not talking about, a Russian warplane attacking a US warplane. We're not talking about US soldiers dying as a result of this. And I also I can't believe I'm saying this because it's so incredibly rare, but I want to commend General Mark Milley, who says that he will not, the military will not consider the Russian jet colliding with a US drone an act of war. So luckily, the US military does not want to escalate war with Russia over this incident. He says incidents happen. Okay, that kind of restraint is really important. And again, I want to commend Mark Milley for putting that statement out. But when it comes to people like Lindsey Graham, any excuse to escalate war, regardless of what the consequences may be. In fact, why don't we hear more from how Graham responded to that incident earlier this week?
We know that Russian drones are flying over Ukraine.
Yeah.
Why don't we shoot down 2 of theirs and send a message? You shoot down 1 of ours, we'll shoot down 2 the first time, 10 the next time. Why don't we do it now and send do it now?
Well, what did Trump do when the Iranians were killing Americans all over the Mideast? He killed Soleimani, right? What did he do to take down the caliphate? He unleashed the military, and the caliphate was destroyed in about 3 months. Do you believe for 1 minute that Russia would have done this on Trump's watch? Do you believe for 1 minute that Russia would have invaded Ukraine if Donald Trump was president of the United States?
I think they had a healthy, realistic fear of Donald Trump.
There is no fear of Joe Biden. His policies are not working. We're being walked on. We're being crapped on. And we're about to have a major war because China is sizing up Biden. And they're going to go into Taiwan if we don't up our game in Ukraine. If Putin gets away with this, there goes Taiwan. The two are connected. So the administration, the Biden administration, it's been slow and weak. Every time Ukraine needs a weapon system, we have to beg to get it.
So earlier in that clip, Graham mentions how Donald Trump succeeded in assassinating Qasem Soleimani, the top general in Iran. And that was, of course, after Trump decided to rip up the Iran nuclear deal, which paved the way for Iran to begin developing nuclear weapons. They continued with their nuclear program as a result of that. How exactly was that a good thing? Donald Trump had ordered an airstrike against Iran, and luckily, in the last second, He was persuaded to call it off because beginning a war with Iran would have been a disastrous idea. But if it were up to someone like Lindsey Graham, we would be at war with Iran right now as we speak. Who knows how many trillions of dollars would be funneled into that war. And that would happen, of course, if Lindsey Graham had his way, prior to Russia invading Ukraine. I mean, he's just so incredibly irresponsible and stupid when it comes to these issues. And then you have blockhead Sean Hannity, like, I think if they shoot down one of our drones, I think we should shoot down 2 of their drones. What are you, in middle school? What are you talking about? We're talking about 2 nuclear powers here. It's just little boys, that's what they are, little boys on national television pretending like they're playing with their G.I. Joes or something. Like, step out of the way. Can we just have some adults converse about this very serious issue? Jesus Christ. So far, Lindsey Graham has happily brought up 2 wars, okay? So the US versus Russia, the US versus China. In that scenario, it would happen after China invades Taiwan. I mean, he's just salivating, just thirsting for that to happen. Can't wait. I mean, his defense contractors can't wait. I mean, they've been beating the war drums against China for years now. But let's watch him add a 3rd war to the mix.
Here's the next war that's coming. Israel is going to have to take military action to stop the Iranians from developing enriched uranium to the point it can become a weapon. They're at 84%. All they have to do is get to 90%. We're not doing a damn thing about the Iranians trying to develop a nuclear bomb.
We had a plan and a deal in place. It was the Iran nuclear deal. It wasn't just between the United States and Iran. There were other countries involved, European countries involved. There was oversight. There were assurances to ensure that Iran was not developing nuclear weapons. I just love how we rip up that deal and then turn around and say, oh my God, would you look at that? Iran is no longer following through with the Iran nuclear deal, which we reneged on. And now they're developing, their nuclear program. And so now Israel has no choice but to attack them as a result of what they're doing. No, Israel did have a choice. Israel's choice, a good choice, would have been to, honor the Iran nuclear deal instead of whining about it constantly, instead of demanding that the United States government rip it up, as Trump eventually did. If you're genuinely concerned about Iran developing nuclear weapons, then maybe you don't renege on the Iran nuclear deal. How about that? But no, the whole point was to renege on it to pave the way for a possible war with Iran, okay? It didn't need to happen that way. It doesn't need to happen that way. Biden should fulfill his promise in renegotiating the Iran nuclear deal with Iran, right? But of course that's not gonna happen because God forbid the United States engage in a more diplomatic approach. The Obama administration did. That was when the Iran nuclear deal came into effect. It was one of the accomplishments of the Obama administration that I thought was great. But of course, Donald Trump ripped it up and Biden failed to put it back into effect through engaging in diplomatic talks with Iran. Now, with that said, I do want to just quickly talk about the funding that Senator Lindsey Graham takes, or I should say, the legalized bribes Senator Lindsey Graham takes from the defense industry. If you take a look at his top funders, the top industries that happen to fund his campaigns, you'll notice that a pretty large figure comes from the defense industry. So between 2017 and 2022, Senator Graham received almost $400,000 in campaign contributions from the defense sector. Okay, but if you also take a look at the total amount, which includes money that was donated by defense to super PACs associated with Lindsey Graham, the number is obviously above $1 million there. Okay, now what else do we know about Lindsey Graham's funding from the private contractors in this case? Well, the super PAC supporting the presidential campaign of Senator Lindsey Graham, remember he ran for president for a minute? Well, that raised $2.9 million through the end of June, a significant portion of which came from defense contractors that stand to gain from Graham's advocacy for greater military intervention around the world and increased defense spending. Because we have to do it, right? According to the defense industry, we absolutely must take what is left of the wealth at the bottom and just funnel it back to the top. Just a handful of defense companies just raping and pillaging the American people, and of course making the globe less safe as a result of their greed. But there's more. Graham's super PAC, called Security is Strength, received $500,000 from billionaire Ron Perlman, whose company McAndrews and Forbes owns AM General, the manufacturer of Humvees and other products for the military. The super PAC also received $25,000 from Jeffrey Immelt, the chief executive of General Electric, which is, of course, another major defense contractor. But my favorite part of this is what you're about to hear, which is during an interview with USA Today, Lindsey Graham himself argued that the defense industry is pouring money into his campaign coffers because it's a great investment. I mean, they sometimes say the quiet parts out loud, and it's incredible. If I were a defense contractor, I'd be big time for Lindsey Graham, because I've been forward leaning on rebuilding our military. People come to you because of your positions. Come on. It's amazing how this system works. I'm curious what Lindsey Graham's positions would be if there were a well-financed group of peace-loving Americans who also donated to his campaigns, maybe donated a little more than defense contractors do. I'm just genuinely curious what unbribed Lindsey Graham would say about this war, how he would perceive the situation. Because again, I just want to reiterate, shooting down Russian planes, the United States shooting down military planes belonging to another nuclear power, is a clear escalation of war. He knows that, and he's calling for it as if it's a smart idea, as if it's not belligerent, as if it's not irresponsible. But is that what he really thinks? If you take the money out of it, what does Senator Lindsey Graham genuinely want? Now, if we go to our international partners and actually listen to what they're saying, it's fascinating, because it seems like there's this desire for peace talks, peace negotiations. In fact, China, which is an ally of Russia, put out a list of where to start for peace negotiations. And you would think that our Western partners would immediately brush that off and say, no, I'm not interested in that. But it turns out that's actually not the case. You're not going to see this coverage in most US media. But I do want to talk a little bit about Wolfgang Ischinger, who he used to be the chair of the Munich Security Conference. He recently sat down for an interview with DW, which is a news organization based in Germany. And in that conversation, he specifically talked about the need for Western countries, the Western alliance, to come together and start discussing what the standards would be, what the asks would be for a potential peace deal. Like, the fact that they haven't come together to do that yet, I think is pretty damning evidence that there's just been this, let's keep going, let's keep this war going environment, as opposed to, all right, what's the plan to actually push for peace? But nonetheless, I want you to hear a little bit from this interview, so let's watch.
I think we need to make sure that we are singing from the same song sheet. Are we singing from the same song sheet today? The United States, the Biden administration, the United Kingdom, France, the entire European Union, NATO allies, Poland, the Baltic states. Are we in agreement about how we want, if and when a negotiating scenario appears, how we want to conduct it? Are we in agreement what our position would be? Let's assume Ukraine will unfortunately, or might unfortunately, not be able to re-liberate Crimea. From their point of view, it's Ukrainian territory, and I would agree it's Ukrainian territory. So what are the options if they can't liberate by the use of military force Crimea?
So the question that he's asking there is an important one, because when it comes to a peace deal, there needs to be compromise, clearly. And so the question of Crimea should be debated, should be discussed among Western allies. What would a peace deal look like? What is an acceptable peace deal for Ukraine? What would Russia agree to, right? I get that they're far away from that right now, but the fact that they're not even having conversations about what a peace deal would look like is an issue. Because let's just keep it real, guys. If you have a superpower, a hegemonic force like the United States, pouring hundreds of billions of dollars in military aid and weaponry into your country, that leads to a disincentive to engage in potential peace talks that could lead to potential compromises, right? If you know that you have this unlimited support from a superpower like the United States, again, that does serve as a disincentive. You're gonna keep asking for more military weaponry, you're gonna keep the war going, you're gonna keep fighting because you don't wanna compromise. But I would just ask anyone who thinks that's the right path to move forward with, how many people need to die in Ukraine in order to see whether or not Ukraine can somehow, with the help of the United States pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into the country through military aid, liberate Crimea? But look, I'm not an expert on this issue, right? I think that the Western countries that are aligned on this issue, as you just heard in that interview, need to sit down and really determine what would a peace deal look like? And more importantly, how do we persuade both sides to sit down and at least begin negotiating this peace deal? There were failed peace talks in the very beginning. Now there are no peace talks at all. And I think that's a problem. With that said, I do want to go to how, what his reaction was, what Wolfgang Ischinger's reaction was to China attempting to broker a peace deal. And his answer honestly surprised me. So let's watch.
I think it would be a big mistake, a diplomatic error, if we decided to ignore the Chinese paper. I agree, the Chinese paper is not a peace plan. It's just a list of rather abstract positions. And there are points, there is at least one point among the 12 points which I think would be quite unacceptable to Western negotiators. That's the point about sanctions, where China argues that it is unlawful under international law for the West to slap sanctions on Russia without proper UN Security Council entitlement. But when you look at the other points in the Chinese paper, I think they are not totally useless at all.
You're not going to hear that perspective in the United States. And that's the reason why I was surprised at how seriously Ischinger took China's letter, right? So he doesn't want to call it a peace deal. He doesn't want to call it a peace proposal. I get it, but it's a good or a potential starting off point. That's how negotiations work. You have both sides, saying what they would like to accomplish, what their proposal is. And through negotiations, there's some give and take, there's some compromise. But at the end of the day, if those negotiations are successful, we could see a day where the war in Ukraine ends. And so rather than brushing off China and saying, well, China's not an ally, China's adversarial, China this, China that, our Western allies seem to be more open to engaging in these negotiations and these conversations. Now, do we know whether Putin is open to those negotiations and conversations? We don't know. But there should at least be some sort of blueprint where our Western allies are all in agreement as to what a decent peace deal would look like. And they haven't even done that. That is so incredibly concerning to me. Because again, it's not just about the weapons that get sent to Ukraine. It's not just about that. It's about the lives that are lost as this war keeps going. And it is shocking to me that there isn't more of a call, a more united front among those on the left in pushing for peace negotiations. Doesn't mean that you abandon Ukraine. It doesn't mean that you let Russia do whatever it wants to the Ukrainians. But so far, what I've seen from the United States government in response to this is more military weaponry, more military funding toward Ukraine, and more of a disincentive for Ukraine to sit down and potentially work out a peace deal with Russia. Just keeping it real with you.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.